Hello. Good to see you. So, one thing we've been discussing recently in these car videos, a theme, is that the subtlety and nuance of a lot of these manifesting ideas is not conveyed clearly enough for people to really understand a lot of this advice a lot of the time. And by that I mean, especially when we first get into manifesting consciously more things in our life, feeling better, assuming better things, and then having our life improve by doing that. Especially when we first get into those ideas and start trying to implement them, what we often don't recognize is like what I said the other day, that, unfortunately, your imagination is working against you more than you at first probably realize. I think a lot of us are, we think to ourselves, well, I'm a positive person. I have an optimistic outlook. But then you start getting into this stuff and working with your thoughts and your feelings and your assumptions. And you very well might realize, holy shit, I'm a lot more negative than I thought. And then what do you do about that? If you truly are a very positive person, a person who expects the best to happen in your life, then you're going to have great success implementing these principles into your life with relative ease. But what I was saying the other day, and what I often touch upon, is that the large majority of us have a negativity bias. We tend to, not all the time, but a lot of the time, especially for subjects that make us uncomfortable, whether it be like health stuff, body image stuff, financial stuff, relationship stuff that makes us uncomfortable, particularly. When our mind goes there, imaginatively, we have such a tendency to think about it in some negative way, even though we don't mean to, even though we're trying to be optimistic and assume the best. And this is what fucks us up a lot of the time. And it's not just the particular issues that bother us that this happens for, but you'll find, at least a lot of us will find, that we're generally more negative than we objectively need to be a lot of the time in terms of what we're thinking and imagining. That's, the negativity bias that basically we all have. If you've managed to, diffuse and neutralize a lot of that negativity bias, and you genuinely feel good the majority of the time, and you genuinely feel expectant of good things happening to you, and maybe specific good things happening to you, that's it. You've done the work. You've done the work. But negativity, how even though we're trying to work with, some could say control or master, I personally prefer the word, work with or direct our imagination. Even though we're trying to work with and direct our imagination, what is not touched upon enough in a lot of these law of attraction teachings, law of assumption teachings, is that we're still imagining negatively, even though we don't want to be. That's, sobering for most of us when we hear that. how can we do that less? That's one of my primary interests when I work with people is showing people um, simple or relatively simple ways to do that less, to be less negative, and to feel better more of the time because of that, quite naturally, by being less negative, by being less reactive, feeling better, and then seeing your life shift and change positively because of that. And I have a lot of experience at this point working with clients, but also doing this on myself. Because I certainly have a negativity bias still towards a lot of things. And to be frank, I think most people do. Even people who have been, steeped in these spiritual manifesting concepts. I think that negativity bias, if we're being honest with ourselves, it's something that is continual work for most of us, So, I was going to read a little bit of Kuwait today, talking a little bit about this. I did want to mention in regards to coaching, I have basically like a money back guarantee program right now, as well as, I offer individual single session coaching. But if you want to work with me immersively for like a month, currently I'm offering a month coaching program where we interact all the time, basically, every day via, either Zoom or phone or text message or email. And currently I'm offering, it's a 30-day program, but if you don't like working with me after 10 days of working together every day, which is a lot, if you're unsatisfied within 10 days of starting this 30-day program, I'll give you all your money back. So that's a pretty good offer. One to consider if you want to do immersive work to find out more about what's bothering you and how to shift it so you feel better. Let's read some Kuwait, shall we? This is from Simple Self-Healing, which, for those of you who don't know, is a book I edited of Kuwait's teachings and Cyrus Harry Brooks' commentary on what Kuwait was talking about. A collection of some of, the best advice in regards to simple ways to utilize autosuggestion. So I'm just going to read a chapter here, which kind of touches upon the nuance and subtlety. And, Kuwait, we could certainly accuse Kuwait of using overly dramatic language and speaking in absolutes. That's fine. Nonetheless, what he's saying seems very relevant and true to me in regards to what we just talked about, in regards to, improving your life in general. Anyway, here, this is the quote I opened this chapter with from Kuwait. It says, "The means employed by healers of all eras has been based upon autosuggestion. That's to say that those methods, whatever they are, words, incantations, gestures, staging, all have been designed to produce in the patient the autosuggestion of recovery." I think I've read that quote before. It's a great one. This passage I'm about to read, what's interesting is people think these ideas are new. Some people, at least, think these ideas are new. And in this chapter, Kuwait is basically like, none of these ideas are new. People always knew about this stuff. And it's just the nuances of implementing it in our lives makes it so, even though this stuff's always been known, far fewer people than you might at first expect are able to implement this stuff consistently, in ways they want. And it's about learning how to do that better and better. So, name of the chapter is Power of Autosuggestion Known Throughout History. And Kuwait says, "The power of thought of idea is inconceivable and immeasurable. The world is dominated by thought. The human being individually is also entirely governed by his own thoughts, good or bad. The powerful action of the mind over the body, which explains the effects of suggestion, was well known to the great thinkers of the Middle Ages, whose vigorous intelligence embraced the sum of human knowledge. So just, brief commentary. It's interesting that Coué says that. People look at the Middle Ages a lot of the time and say, oh, this was an intellectually, dead period in many ways. People didn't understand stuff like this. And, Coué says that's false. And, Coué makes the claim here that the human being is entirely governed by their thoughts, good or bad. You don't have to necessarily agree with that to still benefit from what Coué is talking about. In the very least, I think most people watching this channel would agree with me that the imagination dominates the mind. So even if it doesn't entirely govern everything that's going on physiologically, it plays a huge factor. I would say an overwhelming factor in how our body and our mind react to things. Coué goes on to say, every idea conceived by the mind, said St. Thomas, is an order which the organism obeys. It can also, he added, engender a disease or cure it. So St. Thomas, back in the Middle Ages, said this stuff, same stuff that Coué is talking about last century. Every idea conceived by the mind is an order which the organism obeys. It can engender a disease or cure it. And this is the thing. This is the negative aspect of these ideas that people don't want to talk about. Autosuggestion can help cure you and positively transform your life. But it can also cause stress, pain, and create diseases in your life. That's the negative aspect. That's why I like to talk about how your imagination, even if we're trying to implement this stuff, is often working against you and you don't realize it. And it's about realizing it and fixing it more in your own life. So your imagination truly is working with you and not against you more of the time. But we are being delusional, in my opinion, to think that our imagination is always working for us. I just don't see a lot of proof of that in my life, in other people's lives. And you can call me negative, pessimistic, whatever. I'm not negative and pessimistic. I want to help you and I want to help myself. And being objectively truthful to the best of our abilities helps us do that. Usually, at least. Coué went on to write, the effectiveness of autosuggestion couldn't be more plainly stated than that St. Thomas quote. We know indeed that the whole human organism is governed by the nervous system, the center of which is the brain, the seat of thought. In other words, the brain or mind controls every cell, every organ, and every function of the body. That being so, isn't it clear that by means of thought, we're the absolute masters of our physical organism? And that, as the ancients showed centuries ago, thought or suggestion can and does produce disease or cure it. Again, you don't have to have such a black and white opinion as Coué states here. That, the imagination controls every cell, organ, and function of the body. And that by means of thought, you're the absolute master of your physical organism. That might not be true. But in the very least, your imagination plays an incredible role in regards to all that stuff. And maybe it does play the entire role of controlling your cell, organ, and functions of your body. And that you could be absolute master of your body and of your mind by directing your imagination appropriately. In the very least, there's something significant to this that most people, especially outside of these law of attraction circles, simply don't recognize at all. We, fortunately, recognize it, at least to some degree, which is hugely helpful for making us feel better and improving our lives, and hopefully improving the lives of others. Suggestion can and does produce disease or cure it. Pythagoras taught the principles of autosuggestion to his disciples. Pythagoras, this is back in the day, folks. He wrote, God the Father deliver them from their sufferings and show them what supernatural power is at their call. Even more definite is the doctrine of Aristotle. Aristotle, real modern teacher. The doctrine of Aristotle, which taught that a vivid imagination compels the body to obey it, for it is a natural principle of movement. Imagination, indeed, governs all the forces of sensibility, while the latter, in its turn, controls the beating of the heart, and through it sets in motion all vital functions. Thus, the entire organism may be rapidly modified. Nevertheless, however, vivid the imagination, it cannot change the form of a hand or foot or other member. Very interesting quote from Aristotle. Coué says, I've particular satisfaction in recalling this element of Aristotle's teaching because it contains two of the most important, or I should say, essential principles of my own method of autosuggestion. Number one, the dominating role of the imagination. Number two, the results to be expected from the practice of autosuggestion must necessarily be limited to those coming within the bounds of physical possibility. Two very important points or principles. Coué goes on to say, I'll deal with these essential points in greater detail in another chapter. You can read this book if you want greater detail on that. He says, unfortunately, all these great truths handed down from antiquity have been transmitted in the cloudy garb of abstract notions or shrouded in the mystery of esoteric secrecy and therefore have appeared inaccessible to the ordinary person. Bam! That is most spiritual sounding law of attraction talk. Not the common sense psychological explanation that Coué is giving here, but much more often complicated esoteric stuff that sounds very spiritual and confuses us. And that's even the great teachers like Neville, Joseph Murphy, H. Emily Cady, Joel Goldsmith. As great as all those LOA teachers are, they're using much more complicated esoteric language to say basically, or maybe exactly the same thing that Coué is saying here in layman's language. Again, I'm going to read that. Unfortunately, all these great truths handed down from antiquity have been transmitted in the cloudy garb of abstract notions or shrouded in the mystery of esoteric secrecy and therefore have appeared inaccessible to the ordinary person. Really, really, really important line there. Coué concludes the chapter by saying, however, if I've had the privilege of discerning the hidden meaning of old philosophers or extracting the essence of a vital principle and of formulating it in a manner extremely simple and comprehensible to modern humanity, I've also had the greater joy of seeing it practiced with success by thousands of sufferers for more than 20 years. So even though Coué is incredibly simple in what he's saying, intentionally so, this is big boy, big girl manifesting talk. And the reason that Coué is not more popular today is, I think, in part because his method, as good a method as it is not really just what he's pointing at. You can get into the method and heal yourself of something or manifest something and then not know how to utilize it in the long run unless you are willing to really look more closely at what you are suggesting to yourself throughout the day by default, and working on changing that, and realizing that your imagination truly is a dominating force in your life. And that means it's not just going to be something that you work with once or fix one aspect of your life and that's it. Your imagination is part inherently of what you are at your core. It has to be worked with in one way or the other all the time. And we can get better and better at working with it. That's what interests me. That's what I like to do working on myself. That's what I like to do when I work with people, is find out ways to work with the imagination to improve things, practically speaking. This has been a long video, a lot in it. And there's a lot that we went over here that I think you'll find valuable if you ponder it, if you meditate upon it. Any questions, let me know. I can be reached at radicalcounselor.com.